Brooklyn meets Dante at the station and tells him about her encounter with Gio at the church. Their son is crying because it is Camilla's birthday, and Brooklyn believes Gio needs his father right now. Dante warns her that Gio hasn't forgiven him for acting out and blaming the youngster for Rocco's alcoholism. He claims he needs to take care of things and walks out. Is Stella going to jail? Stella refuses to speak with the fraud agent in the interrogation room until her counsel is present. Trina, Sonny, and Alexis enter the squad room, and Alexis demands to see her client. The other agent takes Alexis in to visit Stella, and Trina tells Sonny that she suspects Drew is after her aunt. Alexis walks in to visit Stella and sends the agents away because they did not obtain the necessary signatures on some legal paperwork. Stella wonders if she'll actually go to jail. Alexis claims she was detained not for what she did, but because of who she is. Sonny and Alexis discuss Drew, and Sonny tells Alexis that the son of a bitch will get what he deserves. Marco made a mistake. Marco drops by Windmere to notify his father that he has made a move against Sonny, which he will not like. Sidwell is upset to find that Marco informed Drew about the bribed judge and that he made a dumb mistake. Marco laments that Sonny will lose his son in the same way that he lost his mother. Sidwell claims he intended to use the information to obtain Sonny's peers and make him pay for Natalia's death. Now that strategy has collapsed, they must determine the consequences for themselves. Will Tracy help Martin assist Stella? Martin informs Tracy about Stella's position and the fact that Drew is to blame. Tracy blames him for Stella's arrest due to his loose lips, and he blames Tracy for his back problems, which began as a result of his insurance concerns. Tracy says the only thing they agree on is that Stella needs help, but they'll do it individually. Martin believes they can collaborate, and he hopes to be present on the day to witness her receiving what she deserves. Brooklyn subsequently appears as Tracy is wrapping up a call about assisting Stella. Brooklyn explains that she just spotted Stella at the station, prompting Tracy to ask why she was there. Brooklyn went to speak with Dante about Gio, who is currently in need of parental care. Is it over for Portia and Curtis? Curtis wonders why Portia made such a snarky remark about him and Jordan. She rants at him, telling him that Stella's problems provide an ideal opportunity for him to work with Jordan again. He snaps, "I don't have time for her petty jealousy." Portia sobs, realizing that she is not blind, and that he has faith in Jordan but none in her. Curtis rehashes all of the lies she's told him since they met. Portia laments that she may have lied, but he is living a lie, and his heart has always belonged to Jordan. Curtis mentions that he has a history with Jordan, but also with her. He has been attempting to suppress his thoughts over her falsehoods, and he had hoped that they could form a family with Trina. Portia accuses him of never truly fighting for them, and if he walks out the door, their marriage would end. Curtis goes on now, and he leaves. He walks out the door. He does not turn around, because he is no longer welcome. Jordan meets Isaiah in the halls while looking for Curtis. He makes sarcastic remarks about Curtis' marriage before accusing him and her of having affections for one other. Jordan claims she has never crossed any lines with Curtis, and there is nothing going on between them. Isaiah says it may be true for her, but is it true for Curtis? She refuses to provide him with an answer. Isaiah says he now sees they never had a chance because her heart was always with Curtis. Curtis interrupts them, and Isaiah gives his response and walks away. Jordan tells Curtis what she's discovered, and all evidence lead to Drew pressuring the feds to go after Stella. Portia throws her wedding photo across the room, destroying it. The cleanup staff must adore her. She tries to remove her wedding band, but it's stuck. Isaiah appears and tries to calm her down. Do Michael and Drew make a deal? Drew visits Michael at Aurora. He informs him that he would bring Wiley and Amelia to Willow, apologize to her, and share custody 50-50ths. Otherwise, he'll utilize the information that Sonny bribed the judge to bring him back to court, where Michael will eventually lose complete custody. So Drew proposes that he accept the 50-50 custody arrangement. Michael claims he's grabbing at straws because his father never did anything like this. Drew feels certain that he can get a judge to probe Judge Heron's bank account. Drew cautions him that not only can he remove Judge Heron, but he can also choose the judge who will replace her. Michael claims the evidence does not exist, and if it does, Drew most certainly falsified it. Following this threat, Michael claims he will push the October custody hearing back. Drew says, "Don't say I didn't warn you," and walks away. Outside Michael's office, Drew contacts Kai and says he has to know where Carly is right now. Meanwhile, Michael invites his father into his office. Can Gio learn to forgive? Gio talks with his mother at church about their birthday traditions and their common love of music. However, he has not been able to play since discovering the truth, as he believes everything is lost. As Gio prays, Dante enters and joins the boy, who believes Brooke Lynn told him where he was. Dante should have known it was Camilla's birthday, which was traditionally celebrated around Labor Day and large end-of-summer festivities. Gio wonders if Dante is upset with Camilla for withholding the truth from him, just as Gloria and Lois did. Dante isn't furious, and he recalls a Christmas when his mother was at a concert and they took care of him. Lois and Gloria placed Gio in his arms when they had to deal with a Seven Fishes disaster, and it was his first time holding a baby. In the show's final moments at the Quartermaines, Brooke Lynn tells Tracy that she thanks God for Camilla because she knows Gio was loved as much as she would have. She is saddened, however, that she will never have that relationship with him. Tracy informs her that Joe's tale is not yet written. At the church, Gio thanks Dante for the story, says he had to leave, and reiterates that he does not want them to be close. Dante apologizes to him again for how he handled him the night Rocco became inebriated. Gio prepares to leave, but pauses to ask Dante what he would have done if he had known about him when he was younger. Dante would like to believe he would have stood up, but they will never know. He is sorry he did not get the chance. Gio continues to walk out. At Windmere, Sidwell informs his son that what has been done is done, and they must now stay one step ahead of Sonny. At Aurora, Sonny assures Michael that he did not pay the judge, which Michael already knew. However, Sonny suggests that someone else may have. Sidwell informs Margot that the best-case scenario is the judge admitting he bribed her. At worst, Sonny learns what he did first. Michael worries if Drew is framing his father. Sonny claims that only the judge has the answers, therefore they need to find her. Sidwell tells his son that they must get to the judge before Sonny. So, I think we know who will be found floating in the river tomorrow. At the station, Stella unloads on Trina, explaining that she was simply trying to protect them all. Trina assures her that everything will be fine, and she begs Alexis to stay with her aunt while she goes hunting for answers. In her office, Isaiah wipes Portia's tears and removes her ring. They are suddenly locked in a passionate kiss. He slams her against the wall, and they start tearing each other's clothes off. Finally, Drew is in his office, calling Willow to express his belief that Michael will reconsider shared parenting. Curtis storms in and threatens Drew that he either quit his crusade against his family or he will finish Drew. General Hospital spoilers are available for Thursday, August 28, 2025. Fans should expect Jen Sidwell to have a tantrum. Sonny Corinthos delivers a terrible prognosis. Curtis Ashford also leaves Portia Robinson. Continue reading, and let's discuss what's coming up in the next episode of the ABC soap opera. Jen Sidwell scolds his son. Let's begin with Sidwell, who throws a temper tantrum while speaking with Marco Rios. Despite Marco's desire for his father to punish Sonny immediately away, the villain insists on patience. When the father and son meet again, Sidwell is likely to shout so loudly that his face turns bright red. I don't understand what he's saying, but he's clearly unhappy at Marco about something. Sonny Corinthos' grim prediction is over, and he will continue conversing with Alexis Davis while Rick Lansing is kept captive downstairs. As the conversation turns to Scout Quartermain and Drew Kane, the mafia leader reassures Alexis. The man claims that one day, someone will take Drew out. Stella Henry's legal battle. General Hospital spoilers for Thursday, August 28 show that she was arrested for medical insurance fraud. The woman sits at the police station, wondering if she will truly go to jail. Meanwhile, Curtis begins to open the door to leave Portia's office at the hospital. Sobbing, the doctor says that if he goes out that door, their marriage would end. Curtis seemed to be walking out that door nonetheless. Trina Robinson has made a discovery. This could be about her parents, but Stella has most definitely been arrested. That likely explains Trina's need for Kai Taylor's assistance later in the week. Furthermore, Gio Palmieri communicates with Dante Falconeri. Could this be the beginning of the family's healing? It's about time, because Gio has been upset for years over a decision made years ago. Tracy Quartermain receives an unexpected proposition on Thursday, August 28, 2025. In a sample clip, Tracy states, "You must be desperate if you're asking for my assistance." Also, Drew continues to threaten Michael Corinthos. Drew believes he has the upper hand over everyone right now, but it appears that his demise is imminent. Which narrative are you most looking forward to witnessing on Thursday, August 28, 2025? Share your opinions in the comments area below. Keep watching ABC soap operas to find out what happens next. Marco's actions were reckless, impetuous, and motivated by a desperation he couldn't fully comprehend, but the ripple effect they were going to have in Port Charles would change everything for everyone associated with Sonny Corinthos. Marco had been quietly studying the ties between his father's past business operations and Sonny's empire for weeks, hoping to find answers to concerns his family had buried for decades. Marco's father, Lorenzo, had constantly advised him not to become involved, to leave the past alone, but he couldn't. Every clue he discovered led him deeper into a world where power, loyalty, and family ties governed everything, and now, whether he knew it or not, he'd walked right into Sonny's crosshairs. It began with a single phone call that Marco was not intended to hear. He had accidentally intercepted a coded letter intended for one of Sonny's senior lieutenants and, rather of discarding it, decrypted it. The documents within showed an anticipated deal involving someone from Lorenzo's past, a man with whom Sonny had unfinished business, and Marco convinced himself that he could interfere and possibly halt whatever Sonny had planned. What he didn't anticipate was Sonny finding out. By the time Marco arrived at the abandoned warehouse where the meeting was meant to take place, Sonny's men had already arrived with guns drawn, and the tension was palpable. Lorenzo arrived minutes later, furious and afraid, recognizing that his son had led them both into a trap from which they could not simply escape. Sonny stood in the midst of the room, calm but lethal, the stillness that comes before a storm. His dark eyes scrutinized Marco like a hawk assessing its prey, and the weight of his stillness spoke more than any threat could. Marco attempted to justify himself, his words spilling out as he insisted he wasn't attempting to undermine Sonny, but Sonny's patience was limited, and Marco had already gone too far. For Sonny, this was more than just one error. This was about control. Who had it, who didn't, and what happened to those who ignored the rules. He couldn't let someone, especially an inexperienced child like Marco, enter a culture based on trust, devotion, and silence. Lorenzo knew this all too well, so he came forward, pleading with Sonny to let him handle his son. But Sonny's expression did not soften, instead, it stiffened. In Sonny's opinion, Lorenzo's failure to control Marco was almost as much of a betrayal as Marco's interference. What neither of them noticed was that someone else was observing from the shadows. Dex, Sonny's loyal enforcer, had concerns about Marco from the start, and while he kept his gun steady and his focus keen, his instincts told him there was more to the story. Marco wasn't behaving out of avarice or ambition, he was acting out of fear of something bigger than Sonny, bigger than anything they could handle. And as Dex listened intently to Marco's rambling confession, he noticed a name that sent shivers down his spine, Novak. The The Novaks had long been enemies of Sonny's group, and if Marco had found into something concerning them, everyone in that room was already in danger. While Sonny debated Marco's fate, across town, Portia Robinson was experiencing a moment that may change her entire future. The aftermath of Curtis' shooting had left her reconsidering everything, her choices, her relationships, her priorities, and while the pain was intense, a shift was on the way that she couldn't see. Curtis, still healing and more distant than ever, had been pushing her away, and just as one door seemed to close on the life they'd always imagined together, another possibility unexpectedly appeared. Jordan Ashford had contacted Portia with shocking news. The hospital was launching a specialist program centered on cutting-edge neurological research, and they wanted her to lead it. Portia initially hesitated, questioning whether she could take on such a large job while her personal life was in upheaval. But as she sat alone in her office, scrolling over the proposal and reflecting on everything she'd been through, from Trina's troubles to Curtis's injury, she realized this was more than just a job. It was about regaining control of her life, about pursuing a course that was not determined by the chaos around her. Back at the warehouse, the tension had risen. Sonny finally broke his quiet, his voice low but keen like a razor. He was extremely clear with Marco and Lorenzo. If Marco wanted to keep breathing, he needed to tell Sonny everything he knew right now. Marco paused, his mouth set, torn between protecting his father and acknowledging the truth, which may make them both targets. When the name Novak from his lips, Sonny's reaction was immediate and explosive. The Novaks had been quiet for months, but Sonny knew better than to assume they had vanished. If they were baiting Marco into a clash, Port Charles was about to become a battleground. Lorenzo's face turned pale as he comprehended what Marco had done. For years, he had hidden his son from the darker aspects of his past, attempting to break the cycle of violence that had defined his own life. But now there was no turning back. Sonny was not just seeking answers, he was also expecting devotion. There was no intermediate ground, either Lorenzo and Marco supported him or opposed him. Meanwhile, Portia's new opportunity brought its own set of challenges. Accepting the hospital's offer meant long hours, big stakes, and the risk of being thrust into the spotlight, which she was not sure she wanted. However, it also provided her with a sense of purpose that she had not experienced in months, if not years. Trina saw the shift almost instantly. Over dinner, she softly but firmly approached her mother, curious as to why Portia appeared both excited and afraid at the same time. Portia explained the issue, and Trina recognized her mother not as a doctor or a caregiver, but as a woman attempting to rebuild herself after tragedy. The two plotlines, Marco's involvement with Sonny and Portia's professional crossroads, were unrelated on the surface, but in Port Charles, everything was interconnected. As Sonny prepared his organization for what he now saw as an unavoidable battle with the Novaks, he needed every ally he could find. And that entailed making painful decisions about who to trust, forgive, and delete. Dex, sensing Sonny's mounting concern, decided to look into Marco's assertions. He found a contact who confirmed his suspicions. The Novaks were quietly expanding their power base, recruiting smaller groups, and laundering money through firms that Sonny did not yet own. Marco's involvement was not coincidental. He'd been targeted and manipulated into drawing Sonny's attention to a deal that was never supposed to happen. It was bait, and Sonny almost went right into it. When Sonny discovered the truth, his rage turned to the Novaks, but it didn't absolve Marco of responsibility. Sonny scheduled a secret meeting with Lorenzo, offering him one more chance to show his allegiance. The ultimatum was severe but clear: if Lorenzo wanted his family to survive, he would tell Sonny everything he knew about the Novaks, every connection, secret, and name. Failure was not an option. Across town, Portia had her own moment of decision. After days of consideration, she accepted the hospital's offer, formally becoming one of the main voices in neurological research. The statement caused tremors throughout the neighborhood, but it also pushed Curtis to address the growing gap between them. He arrived at her office, conflicted and raw, trying to reconcile his pride with the truth that he was losing her in ways he never expected. Their discourse was quiet but intense, with unspoken words and feelings too complex to untangle in a single sitting. As darkness descended over Port Charles, the city was alive with anxiety. Marco was alone in his father's living room, reviewing everything that had happened and understanding how close he had come to killing them both. Lorenzo joined him, initially mute, until eventually agreeing that some mistakes could only be suffered. For Marco, that meant demonstrating to Sonny that he could be trusted and valuable in the impending war with the Novaks. It was unclear whether Sonny would ever completely forgive him. And in the hallways of General Hospital, Portia stood by a window that overlooked the city, her reflection framed by the warm glow of the streetlights beneath. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful, not because her life was perfect, but because she could finally choose it for herself. Even as she welcomed this new chapter, she couldn't ignore the feeling that something was about to shift, not just for her, but for everyone in Port Charles. Sonny's conflict was brewing. The Novaks were going through the shadows. And Marco's error had ignited the first flame in what promised to be a violent fight. Portia's door had opened just as others were closing, and though she didn't realize it yet, her choices would soon intersect with Sonny's in ways neither of them could have predicted. Nothing in Port Charles stayed separate for long, and once the boundaries were established, there was no turning back. Sidwell's words slashed through the tension-filled air like a dagger, with no space for misinterpretation. He stood at the edge of the dimly lighted Metro Court terrace, his jaw gritted and hands tightening at his sides, his rage growing with each passing second. Marco, leaning casually on the railing, smirked, as if Sidwell's rage pleased him rather than scared him. The two guys had been circling one another for weeks, with anger simmering beneath the surface until tonight, when everything erupted. Sidwell's allegations came quickly and harshly, loaded with treachery and rage. He accused Marco of betraying him, making secret transactions behind his back, and undermining the ideas they had spent months developing together. Marco's smirk vanished as Sidwell's rant gained traction. He lifted his hands defensively, claiming he had done nothing wrong, but his protestations just inflamed Sidwell's rage. The tension between them rose quickly, with voices echoing across the patio, attracting the attention of surrounding guests who were now muttering amongst themselves. Marco eventually snapped, saying that Sidwell was neurotic and dangerous, and that his desire for control was ruining everything they had accomplished. The heated confrontation escalated, with insults leading to threats and each man refusing to back down. Inside the Metro Court, Sonny stood at the bar, quietly watching the confrontation unfold through the glass doors. He didn't intervene yet. Instead, he examined both men, his keen intuition reading between the lines of their remarks to piece together a larger image. He sensed Sidwell and Marco's tense friendship was fraying, but what happened next piqued his curiosity even more. Sonny leaned closer to Drew, who was drinking a glass of bourbon alongside him, and lowered his voice so that only Drew could hear. "Do you see that?" Sonny replied, nodding softly towards the deck. "That will blow up. When it does, Marco will make a move. My bet? He isn't going for Sidwell directly." Drew stiffened at the prediction, his jaw hardening and his hold on the glass becoming taut. He glanced to Sonny, looking for any sign of exaggeration, but his attitude was unreadable, his eyes dark and calculating. Drew didn't answer right away. Instead, he returned his focus to the conflict outside, attempting to understand what Sonny was saying. Sonny's senses were rarely wrong, and if he suspected Marco was targeting Drew, it was only a matter of time before the consequences hit him. Sonny leaned back slightly, his voice low but steady, explaining his reasoning. Marco was a strategic thinker, not a hothead. If Sidwell and Marco's cooperation failed, Marco would find someone else to blame, someone to eliminate so he could reclaim control. Drew, with his expanding prominence and complex relationships, was the most obvious target. Sonny was not providing this information out of loyalty or friendship, he was giving a warning. Whether Drew liked it or not, he was caught in the center of a developing battle, and remaining neutral was no longer an option. Across town, Curtis sat in his poorly lit apartment, staring at the luggage on his bed. The clothes were nicely folded inside, but his palm lingered on the zipper, hesitant to seal it. The decision had been taken days before, yet the weight of it remained heavy on his chest. He had attempted to save his marriage to Portia, to fight past the anger and bitterness, but something inside him had changed following the most recent revelation. Trust, once damaged, does not heal overnight, and the stillness between them had grown excruciating. Portia's voice reverberated faintly in his recollection, pleading, apologizing, and explaining every move she'd made, but Curtis was no longer comforted by them. Every time he looked at her, he saw the cracks in their foundation, and the man he once was couldn't accept the reality of what they had become. Tonight, he had finally accepted it. He was leaving Portia, leaving behind the aspirations they'd created together, and stepping into uncertainty because remaining had come to choke him. As he zipped the suitcase shut, his phone vibrated on the nightstand. It was Trina, and her name lit up the screen. He paused before responding, knowing she'd hear the finality in his voice. When he eventually picked up, she questioned if the reports were true. Was he really leaving? Curtis tried to soothe her by carefully picking his words, but there was no gentle way to deliver the facts. Trina's quiet on the other end stung him worse than he imagined, and when she finally spoke, her voice cracked and the anguish was clear. Meanwhile, at the Quartermain estate, Tracy stood stopped in the study's doorway, her sharp features etched with amazement as she peered at the documents sprawled across the desk. Her normally unshakable composure wavered for the first time in years as she read the data again, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. These papers were more than just statistics and contracts, they represented a huge change in power, one that had the potential to upend everything she had spent decades safeguarding. Brooke Lynn, standing across the room, eyed her grandma with caution, knowing Tracy rarely showed vulnerability. "Are you all right?" she inquired gently, her voice hesitating, almost fearful of the response. Tracy didn't answer right away, still lost in contemplation as the reality struck in. Finally, she turned, her voice quieter than normal and filled with suppressed rage. "Do you know what this means?" she demanded, raising the papers. Brooke Lynn shook her head, hesitant, and Tracy inhaled quickly, pacing the entire study. What stunned her was not simply the financial ramifications, which were enormous, but the betrayal underlying them. Someone close to her, someone she trusted entirely, had planned this move right under her nose. Tracy, whose entire identity was based on control and power, found it almost unbearable to realize she had been caught off guard. She promised silently in that moment to seek the truth, to discover who was behind this, and to dismantle them piece by piece. Sidwell and Marco's argument had heated up at the Metro Court. Security was called in after the two males came perilously close to throwing fists. Drew moved outside to try to de-escalate the situation, but the moment he did, Marco's pointed glare fell on him, full of thinly veiled resentment. Sonny's forecast was coming true faster than Drew expected. Sidwell took advantage of Drew's arrival, immediately accusing Marco of scheming against him and drawing Drew into the argument. Marco, outraged at being cornered, retaliated with his own charges, alleging Sidwell had been manipulating Drew all along. The fight got deep and complicated, with alliances moving in real time as the audience grew. Sonny remained inside, paying close attention to every micro-expression and movement. His forbearance was deliberate, interfering too soon would jeopardize his ability to determine where everyone's genuine loyalty lay. He realized it wasn't only about Sidwell and Marco, it was about leverage, power, and posture. Every word spoken tonight would reverberate throughout Port Charles, and Sonny intended to stay 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Hours later, Curtis stood at the harbor's edge, suitcase in hand, the cool night air stinging his face. He looked out into the Black Sea, wondering if he had made the correct decision. Leaving Portia meant more than simply terminating a marriage, it meant leaving a life he believed he wanted, and the stability he'd worked so hard to restore after years of turbulence. But deep down, he knew the truth, sometimes holding on was more damaging than letting go. Tracy, still reeling from her finding, made a late-night call to an old friend, her tone calm but piercing. She demanded answers, names, dates, and motives. Whoever crossed her underestimated her, and their mistake would pay them dearly. Her mind raced through possibilities, connecting dots that others couldn't perceive until a terrible thought struck. What if this wasn't only for business? What if someone was purposefully destroying the Quartermaine legacy from the inside out? By the next morning, the aftermath of the Metro Court altercation had spread like wildfire across Port Charles. Rumors flew, alliances were put to the test, and everyone was waiting to see what Sonny would do next. Drew couldn't get rid of the image of Marco's glare, the unsaid menace hanging between them. Sidwell, however, remained silent, planning his own answer behind closed doors. What about Sonny? He was not reacting, he was preparing. Because, while everyone else was engulfed in the commotion, he could see a larger fight on the horizon. Drew's senses indicated that he was not only in danger, but also the key to everything.